Hi and welcome back to Plastic Models by a Regular Dude and part 3 of the viewer's choice build number 2, which is the Eduard MIG 21 PFM. So where I left off last time, I had completed some of the interior parts for the fuselage and the side instrument consoles. Got those assembled, less the photo etch parts, because I'll do that after I paint. So I think I'm at a point now where once this stuff starts getting put together, some of the stuff's going to need to be painted. So I'm going to start doing some masking and on some of the parts and on the interior of the fuselage, and get that ready for primer and then paint. So let me start on the masking and I'll come back. Okay, I've got some of it masked off here. So the next part I want to do before I start the painting and stuff, so I'm going to cut these parts off here and see if I can actually install those on this side of the fuselage and have those at least in place before I paint, so I don't have to tape that off, but so that I can, spray it all in place. So I'm going to cut those parts off real quick and see what it looks like. Okay, tip number 1 of the day. In test fitting the fuselage halves to see how they were going to go together, which is something that really should be done every time just to make sure, I discovered something. The parts fit together very well. However, even when pressed together, there was still a little bit of a seam along the edge. No matter how hard I squeezed, there was a seam. So that would mean filling, sanding, whatever. And there's no need for that. Here's what I did. Taking my knife, my hobby knife, and on the inside edge, only contacting the inside portion, inside portion of the seam and not the outside portion of the joint line, I gently scrape all around both sides of the fuselage, thereby lowering this edge in comparison to the outside edge. So as hopefully you can see here, where I didn't scrape, it's shiny. That's the plastic as it comes out of the box. Dull is where it's been scraped, so you can kind of keep an eye on where you're scraping so you don't get the outside edge. That way, whenever you put the two halves together, more of the outside edge is contacting the opposite piece as opposed to the inside edge, which will give you a nice clean joint. So whenever you put your cement in there and you squeeze it together and everything's lined up correctly, you're going to have a whole lot less sanding, scraping, or whatever you need to do, and you won't have to do any filling, which makes it a lot easier when putting one of these things together. So that's the tip of the day. Just thought I'd let you know that real quick. I'll continue on with all my masking and getting ready to paint some of this stuff. Okay, so I've got the parts I need to on some holding sticks here for priming. I've got everything taped off that I want taped off for any contact points for the cement, and then one part stuck on here. And I'm using, for my primer, black Stynylrez. Now, a quick note on the Stynylrez primer. Oftentimes I've seen questions on forums asking, what can I use to thin Stynylrez? It was fine when I first got it, now it just seems too thick, blah blah blah. Well, here's the deal. Number one, it recommends that you use, I think, a minimum of like a 0.5 or 0.4 needle. I don't know. I don't think that's as critical as making sure that the very first time you use this stuff, you make sure it is well mixed. You can shake the tarnation out of it forever And once you do that, it's probably still not mixed up enough. So you need to get down into the bottom of the bottle and get all of the pigment or whatever it is they use in primer up off the bottom. And I use one of these, just a Badger mixer. I'll shake it up really good, stick the mixer down, take the cap off, stick the mixer down in the bottom, and just swirl that baby around with the motor running for quite a while, and then shake it up again. That way you make sure whenever you use this stuff, it's the same viscosity the first time you use it as the last time you use it. So that's just a tip on using Stynel Res. A lot of people seem to have trouble with it. It takes a lot of stirring and mixing. More is better. So got that. I'm using the Iwata HP M2, which is my go-to single color or primer sprayer. Unless I'm doing something really big, then I'll use my my Pache gravity or siphon feed, but single action. But for this works really well. So test a little bit, make sure I got some primer coming out, and then go to town. Okay, see how that works? Perfect. So I'm not going to bore you with the whole thing. I'll come back when it's ready for paint. Alright, as you can see, I've got all of the interior parts painted that I needed to paint, as well as the nose cone, the instrument panel, the exhaust, etc. So I went ahead and cut off of the fret these two pieces here for the cockpit. Now, as you can see, the color is an exact match, but you know what? That's going to do fine, because once I weather this up in here, you're not going to be able to tell much, and it's going to be enclosed. But the color is this is a little bit bluer than this. So just as a note, if you ever build this kit, interior turquoise green, MIG 223 is not an exact match, but I'm okay with that, and hopefully you are too. So the next part I need to do for this is I need to glue on the part D56, which is a lever that goes right here. So I'll cut that off and get that ready. Okay, the side panel here I've got glued in place, and what I did is, since this piece of plastic here was solid, I put a few dots of the gel super glue, got it positioned, held that in place. So now I can hold this in place and use regular super glue and get that glued in place. These real fine applicators are real handy. There we go. Hold that for a second, make sure my finger's not stuck to it. Just like that. Okay, so now there's a small part which is PE4, which is this. Basically I have to fold that over and glue it right there. So this is it. I've cut it off and then just fold it in half like that. And then I'm going to use the gel on this one as well. That'll give me a second to get it in place. So I'll just take a little dot of the gel. If I can get any on this stick. Right there. Drop it in place like that. It's a little crooked. Okay, alright, so there's that one. Now all I need to do is glue this here. And again, I'm going to use the gel. Just put a few dots. That. Take the part, in position, drop it on there, make sure it's lined up, press it in place. Sorry, my hand was in the way, but it's kind of hard filming and doing this at the same time. Okay, for the instrument panel, this lower part here, since it's easy to get to, I'm going to use my Gator's Grip acrylic hobby glue, because that'll really give me some time to make sure it's lined up properly. Especially since there's nothing that will give it a positive connection on the edges. I just gotta eyeball it. So get it in place like that. Make sure it is pressed down. Use some tweezers to make sure it's flush. Like that. Then let that dry up a minute. In the meantime, I think I will put this one on here as well. Make sure it still fits like it's supposed to. So here's what I'm going to do. This is why I use that Gator's glue, Gator's Grip. I'm going to remove that. I'm going to do that after I get the upper part done. So get this excess glue off of here so it doesn't make it uneven when I do glue it back into place. And because this wasn't bottoming out quite enough on the bottom, there we go. That's what I want. Make sure. Okay, I'm gonna have to trim this just a little bit. So that part of the instrument panel will fit down there. The nice thing is, the two pieces will cover each other up, so you won't have any weirdness showing. Okay, I got this part, the back part with the dials in place. Now, put the front on like this, and you have a really swell looking instrument panel. So I'm gonna monkey around with this off camera because it could take me a while and I don't want to bore you, but basically it's all in place. That's where it's going, and that is what it looks like. Okay, now with all the photo etch in place, I need to do some detail painting. I need to paint this part here in the interior color, this flat black, this flat black. These straps I need to paint, which color did it say? Sorry, folks. I'll find it here in a second. Yeah, red brown. I think it's supposed to be leather. So I need to detail paint those, and for those I'm going to be using Vallejo Model Air paints. I also need to paint this around this scope here, or radar screen, or whatever it is. Need to paint that flat black as well. So I'm going to get cracking on that and get that painted and not bore you with having to watch me do it, and then I can start putting all this together. Okay, so I got all my tape peeled off of both sides where I need to glue stuff, except for this one right here. So I can start gluing all this stuff in the middle since I've got the details painted. I've got the cockpit laid in here, matched up perfectly. So then I need to glue this nose cone in. There's some pins and some little locator slots right in there, so that fits just like that. So get that glued in. Okay, so that's in place. Do a quick test fit, make sure it still lines up. There's a lot of parts in here that have to line up, and that looks pretty good. Okay. Then this part needs to go in the tail section. This curved part shows on the instructions right there, faces down. Real quick, like before I forget, I need to put this instrument panel in place. Just like that. Make sure that's seated all the way, and then I'm going to apply the cement from behind. So that's in place there. There we go. Put put this together real quick and make sure it's still lined up. Yep, fits together just right. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to tack it on the back as well, so it doesn't move around. Okay, so there's that, and then this part here goes here. You know what, before I do that, I think I'm going to glue on the back of the cockpit. I'm going to work my way back. Okay, so that fits in there like that. Again, make sure it lines up. There we go, it clicks into place. So before I get that glued in there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to scrape some of this cement off where it contacts. Okay, I got the paint scraped off, so I'll get a good contact here. Make sure it snaps into place. By taping all that off, it'll give me a nice solid connection. Get some of this cement off the side here, or this paint off the side. I've said it in some of my other videos, there's a lot of people that glue with paint in place and it seems to work fine. I just prefer to have a nice plastic to plastic joint. Less chance of something going amiss. Okay, so that's there. So then just put my cement all along the edge here. And then underneath here as well. Hold it in place for a second. So that all looks good. So now we can do this part here. Now these two center parts right here I'm going to do after I have the fuselage glued together, because I did a test fit and they'll pop in because the plastic is long enough here that it'll flex out a little bit, so they'll pop in. So I want to make sure those are in there really tight. Now the nice thing is there are two lines, one here and here, that show you how it's supposed to line up with the fuselage, which makes it really nice. No guesswork, and you don't have to worry about it going in there crooked. Okay, make sure that's in there nice and tight, and then let that set up for a little bit before I glue the other side of the fuselage on. Alright, so here's where it is. This has been glued in. All this is glued in. The one thing to make a note of is right here in the instructions. It tells you to add weight into the nose cone, and that is something you definitely want to do, since it is a tricycle type landing gear with the front gear in, or the single gear in the front and then the two in the wings, because if you don't, it'll fall back. So what I did is just using regular old round split shot fishing weights. I just dropped it full in the nose cone there, and then using my sprue goo, which is bits of old sprue and little plastic pieces dropped in a little bit of Tamiya extra thin, I use that to fill it in and hold it in place. Now hopefully that will be enough weight on the front to make it sit like it should. So I don't know really what else to do other than gluing some more inside this void right here, which I may do, but I can do that from the top. Once I have this together, I could drop some in through there. So we'll see what happens. But anyway, I'm going to start gluing this fuselage together, and the first part I'm going to glue, the way I do fuselage is I do a section at a time. I put my glue there and make sure it's lined up perfectly, clamp it really well, and then I'll probably do both of these since this fits, since this lines up so well, and clamp that and let it dry, probably overnight. Then I'll do probably this back here, make sure that lines up, and then that should help the middle portion line up. So I'm going to start gluing all this together and clamping it, and I'll come back and show you what it looks like. Alright, so I've got the front and the rear of the upper part of the fuselage cemented. So now I'm going to do the spine part here. So that's pretty long. It's going to be a little more tricky to make sure I keep it aligned, but shouldn't be too bad. I really want to focus on areas where there's a lot of detail to minimize the need for sanding. So I'm going to start there, apply my cement from the inside like I normally do, like that, and go ahead and move on down this way. So right here where it's plastic all the way around with no big cavity underneath, I can put a clamp and make sure, just run my fingernail on it, make sure it's pretty even. Something this long, it's really going to be hard to do like I normally do, so I'm just going to have to be real careful. Okay, then squeeze this part here, which just kind of hold that in place for a few minutes. Make sure it's as even as it can be. I sure don't want to have to sand it too much. See, the cement is seeping up through there, so that's good. The melted plastic, that's what I want to see. So far so good. A little bit of a step going on there, so let's see if I can fix that. Yeah, that's better there, so I'm going to put a little bit more cement. Hold it up to the light, no gaps. little bit of a step going on there. So let's see if I can fix that. Alright, so that's all stuck in place really good, so we're going to let that sit and cure up, because that will finish this part right here. So I'm going to let that dry up, and then actually let me see if I can get these in here without causing too much trouble. Okay, this cement is set up enough where I can squeeze these parts in, so I'm going to go ahead and glue them in like that. And again, it's nice that they include these lines on here, because that helps you make sure that you've got everything level and lined up correctly. Now, after seeing me do this and seeing that, you know, for any of my beginning viewers out here who maybe haven't done very many aircraft kits, you know, I'm a real stickler for making sure the things line up so I don't have to sand them. If you have to sand stuff, it's not the end of the world. I mean, that's part of it. And, you know, I'll show you later, because this isn't going to be 100% perfect. I just try and get it as close as I can. So don't freak out if you do need to do some sanding, because, you know, you're going to have to do some. So don't wig out. It's no big deal. I just like to try and get it as smooth as I can, as even as I can, to minimize the amount of sanding that I'm going to have to do. So it's looking pretty good. Alright, so I've got all that glued. I've got those parts put in and lined up nicely. So that finishes up to this point here. So it takes care of all of the interior of the fuselage. So I'm going to call this video quits right here, because it's a good place to stop. And next time we'll pick up with started working on the spine part, the tail stabilizer, and move on from there. So if you have any questions or comments, etc., put them down below and I'll get back to you as quick as I can. And until next time, on the viewer's choice build number 2, the MiG-21 PFM, I will see you all later.